Have a look at a really effective thing that Photoshop has called layer styles. Layer styles are available by pressing the FX button at the lower point of your layers panel, and they will allow you to apply particular styles to either individual layers or entire groups as required. So I'm actually going to do this to the entire group folder here. I'm going to go to the FX button and I'm going to go to bevel and emboss just as a starting point. There are a number of different options for this, and you'll see bevel and emboss is up here, and we've got things like stroke, color overlay, gradient overlay, and drop shadow. If there is a plus sign here, it means you can add multiples of this, which I've already done, which is why I have multiple options for overlay and stroke. But I'm going to start with bevel and emboss. There is a style option where you can go from outer bevel, inner bevel, emboss, and a whole lot of others. I'm going to stick with inner bevel. In this case, I think it's going to work well. We can change the depth, the size, and we can also choose to have it really hard by dropping the soften down to 0, or we can have that quite soft by taking it out further. I'm going to go for something in between. We can change the angle of the light direction, which can have some very interesting effects as well. Please note that if you have the tick sign on global lighting, that direction and angle of that lighting will be on everything that has global lighting ticked on in your layer styles, which can be quite useful to maintain a specific angle or direction. I'm going to go with that. There are some options for contours for this, which can have some quite interesting effects, and you can also create your own contours as well. I'm going to stick with this, the plain normal one. You can change how the light and dark areas are applied. You could potentially change the color of these if you wish, or you can leave them as they are, and you can change the blend modes and even the opacities of these as well. So as you can see, there is a large amount of options and manipulation for these things, and well worth having a look. Let's have a quick look at some of the others that can be quite useful. Stroke is going to add a line, just like we did with the regular shape layer, to the outside. You can choose to have the center, inside, or outside, just as we do with our shapes. You can scale it, and you can even add things like gradients and patterns to this as well. I'm going to stick to just plain color. Let's drop the size of that. You can add multiple strokes, as you see I have here. Let's change the color of some of these, just add some so we can actually see them in work, and once again change them inside, outside, change the size as required. So we can have multiple strokes as required, but I'm going to stick down to one. Inner shadow is going to do literally that. It's going to allow you to create a shadow inside of your object, and once again, if you have global light ticked on, that will be the same lighting that's applied to all of our objects. If you wish for it to be independent, simply turn that off, and now you can manipulate that accordingly. I'm going to turn that off. Let's go to color overlay. Color overlay allows you to add a color to the entire object, and depending on what your blend mode is, if you switch it to normal and 100%, it's going to fill that in completely, or you can go to things like multiply, overlay, or even difference can have a really interesting option for that. By changing your color, these are all going to vary differently depending on the background color of your object. So it's well worth checking out. Also, if it's not working for you, you can also do a blend by changing the opacity of that. I'm going to turn that off as well. Gradient does that. It allows you to add a gradient to your image. There are a number of gradients to be able to choose from, and you can completely build your own gradients by selecting colors, adding colors, deleting colors, or just by going through some of the defaults here. Let's get something funky like this one. I'm going to switch the blend mode to something like multiply, and there is my gradient there. You can change the gradient style from things like linear, which goes from one side to the other. You can reverse that. You can go to radial. I'm just going to reset alignment, which you can also scale. And if you click on your object, you can also move it around. Occasionally there is a glitch with this, in which case just apply it by hitting OK. Then you'll see all of our options here. I'm going to go back to gradient, double click on there, and now what you can see is I can actually start moving that radial gradient around my object. So if you do run into that glitch, there is the option. And once again, scale, and we can just go through and manually change all our different gradients, or build our own gradients if we wish, until we get something that we like. I'm going to stick with this one for now, and let's try a different blend mode until we get something that we like. I might stick with multiply. Pattern overlay does that. It allows us to add a pattern from Photoshop's list, or we can create our own patterns. But once again, be cautious with this, as sometimes it's going to not really scale very well, as these are all bitmap based. So I'm going to turn that one off. Other options include outer glow, which allow us to add a glow. I've got a funky one selected here, but let's change the contour to something normal, and let's give it a nice orange glow in this case. And you can change things like the spread and size and range of all of these things and create some really interesting things. Drop shadow, as mentioned before, is going to allow us to create a drop shadow. Use global lighting to choose the direction. You can change the spread of it, the size of it, and also the distance that it arrives to our object. So you can get something that's going to be kind of a furred or straight edged, and also play around with the opacity and also the color. I'm going to turn that one off as well. The great thing about these layer styles is that they're all affected and can be adjusted at any point. So we can get back to our original layer here and move like that.